How do people, what's the number for the hotline, and what are some of the questions that people often have, questions or misconceptions about the clinical trial that
Yeah,
you
this
often
is a
get?
great question. The hotline answer, that's the easy part of that question. It's 844-4-BRAIN-5.
844
4
brain
brain
5.
5. Get
So
it right?
3 4s and then brain 5.
Yeah, we worked a while to get one that we could
Eight
remember.
triple four brain 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, and so that's the hotline, and we do answer that. We staff that around the clock. We get calls from doctors that get a positive result back, say, hey, I saw this written on there, or I Googled it. We've gotten calls from loved ones who said, hey, the doctor just walked in and said this. I immediately got out my phone. I Googled it. Up popped the trial. I've got questions, right? I think in today's day and age, the biggest challenge is mistrust of the healthcare system. So you have often a traumatized family because that patient has gotten sick. They are hallucinating. A lot is going on. They're thrust into this medical system in crisis. And then we walk in and say, hey, you want to do a clinical trial? Well, that can feel like, no, I don't want to be a guinea pig, right? But you got to step back and realize who participates in clinical trials. If you look at who benefits from clinical trials around the world, it's usually a medically savvy, sort of privileged folks who get access. So you got to ask yourself, do they want to be guinea pigs? Probably not. So why are they participating in a clinical trial, right? What is it that trial can offer to me or my loved one? That should be the question that we're all asking. Tell me about your trial. Tell me why we need a trial. If there's already 10 approved medications, then maybe I'm not going to be in that trial, but there aren't for this condition. We're still learning. There's nothing approved. For this condition, NMDA receptor encephalitis, we don't know the right medications, when to use them, how long to keep people on them. We don't know any of that yet. And so in a clinical trial, that's what we're trying to figure out. But also you're getting access to a team who's dedicated to this day and night, right? Who's going to follow the patient, your loved one, long term, right? We are meeting with this trial all the time. We have this hotline. The Professor Dalmau, who's the one that discovered this, is participating in the trial, right? We desperately want to know the right thing to do. That's why we're doing this, right? But in this era we live in of medical mistrust, I get it. I get it. People hear clinical trial and they're like, I don't know about that, right? I would probably do the same. So I would just encourage people, ask the questions. If somebody offers you something, why? Why should I? What would you do, right?
Is there a cost to this financially to participate in clinical trials? Because, insurance
Right.
and cost usually come into play when people make care decisions, unfortunately. What does that look like for a patient who's facing this, has probably gone through a battery of tests that, is covered at various things just to figure out what is actually going on? Maybe they have an answer and now they're like, oh, there's this other thing you can do. What does that look like for them financially?
Yeah. I think in the clinical trial space, the short answer is you're not incurring extra costs. But in the clinical trial space, we have to be very careful about this because part of that following the patient long term involves more visits than you would otherwise get if you weren't in the trial. Now, to me, that's all benefit all the way because you're being watched so closely. You are being followed. You are getting access, right? If something goes wrong, if there's a concern, you have access. But that does mean, now all of a sudden, if you live an hour away from the hospital, the academic center, where the experts are, you've got to get there. And so what I can say is we spend a great deal of time as a trial team making sure that the participants get access to what they need and are not overly burdened. And it's a different situation for every single participant in the trial. So we have gotten very creative in getting these patients the care that they need.
How is this work funded?
So our trial is dually funded, and that's been important and such a benefit. So it is an NIH-sponsored trial. It is an NIH-funded trial. What does that mean? When you get to the basics, taxpayers. The taxpayers are paying to support NIH. NIH said, you know what? This is a disease for which we have no approved treatments. Yeah, we need to study it. So it's an NIH-funded grant. that pays for different aspects of the care at each of the sites. And then the pharmaceutical company that makes the compound inebilizumab, the one that we're studying, has also on the back end offered to provide that drug for free and to support some of the trial to help. And then on the back end, the pharmaceutical company Amgen, who makes inebilizumab, is supplying that drug for free, and they are also supporting some of the auxiliary services of the trial as well.
And feel free to tell me how comfortable you are getting into this, because I think that that's a blind spot, right, in science communication when it comes to understanding how science works for people who might end up participating in clinical trials. There's such a pharmaceutical companies are a big black box, and they're often evil, quote unquote, right? But then we go to the doctor and we need medication. And so there's not really the missing link is, how does a pharmaceutical company that's known in the news mostly when they're doing things that are unsavory or jacking up prices or giving us medication that we don't need, how do they come up with this medication that you're then like, and we're going to try it for this? Can you bridge that gap for me a little bit?
This is a great question, right? And I think it's our tendency to oversimplify things. You know, how does scientific development come about? Well, some of it comes through our federally funded research programs, for sure. And that's at the backbone of many subsequent development of drugs that is done by a pharmaceutical company, right? And at the end of the day, there are people investing in those pharmaceutical companies. And so that aspect of it, which we try to stay sort of away from in medicine, they're going to need a return on their investment. So some people say, oh, I'm never going to talk to or consider or interact with a pharmaceutical company. And that's fine. But without those pharmaceutical companies, we wouldn't have most of these drugs, right? So we like to make everything so black and white, right? You're good, this person's evil. We all know that's not really how it works, right? It is nuanced. And so this is something you need to face, right? I get it. I have the same sort of impulses sometimes and the same sort of gut knee-jerk reactions. But the beauty of this trial is that the need is so great in this rare disease that everyone has come to the table and they're collaborating.